Good day. My name is Don Green. Many of you know me as a lawyer from many of the gun shows in Nevada, and on my YouTube videos on the American Guns and Glory Network. And I've been a lawyer nearly 40 years now, specializing in firearms litigation with the ATF, FBI, state court litigation. I represent gun dealers, I represent gun shows, I represent private parties. Over the past several weeks, I've been presented with a number of very interesting questions. And to help me answer those questions and to put you in the right direction, we're going to be presenting those questions, and we'll have two videos at the end. But today, to help me with expertise concerning these particular points is Ms. Maggie Mordaunt of Homeland Protection Training in Nevada, and she does work elsewhere outside the United States for the government. We can't say what she does, but it's very important. Would you please introduce yourself, Maggie?
My name is Maggie Mordaunt with Homeland Personal Protection, hpptraining.com. I'm also a pro staff member for Bass Pro Shops, Nevada Department of Wildlife Hunter Education Instructor, as well as the Nevada Firearms Coalition's Education and Training Director, and I'm very excited to be here at Rigel Studios today.
Okay. Now, we're going to do the show as the following. We're presenting some questions. We'll answer those questions, and then we'll present two videos at the end so you can apply perhaps some of the answers or look at the questions as you see these videos from various news sources. May we have the first question, please? Now, the first question, very, very precise. Does Nevada law require you to show your weapon to a police officer upon request during an otherwise valid traffic stop? Maggie, the answer?
Well, it really depends. The traffic stop would be the reason why they're stopping you. If you are driving recklessly, let's say 20 miles over the speed limit, driving recklessly, and it's under the guise of reasonableness, they may ask you, do you have any weapons in your vehicle? And the answer would be yes if you did, no if you don't. The biggest thing we see is typically law enforcement, if you have a concealed carry weapons license, a concealed firearms permit in the state of Nevada is what we call it, if they run your license plate and the vehicle is actually registered to you, that's going to come up anyway. And so it's up to the law enforcement officer to ask you if you have that license, CCW, if you have a firearm in your vehicle. If you don't have a CCW and you're open carrying, which we're an open carry state, it's up to the law enforcement officer to ask you that. But if they don't ask you, you don't have a duty to inform. Okay. They have to ask you.
In the situation, if a person decides to tell the officer, I have a concealed weapon permit, I have my weapon on me, would you like to see it? Is that a reasonable question?
For you to ask law enforcement?
Yes.
Do you want to see my firearm? I mean, it's not mandatory. I don't know that it would help anything. I mean, it's not going to get you out of a speeding ticket, just saying.
Okay.
So,
yes.
Yeah, so I mean, if they do come up and you say, I have firearms in my vehicle, or I have a concealed carry weapon on me, or I have an open carry on me, it's subjective to the law enforcement officer to say, I don't, just leave it where it is. Don't show me yours, and I won't show you mine. I don't know that it makes them any safer or you any safer. There's no evidence to show that it makes them safer or you safer to have the firearm on you or say that you have a firearm on you. It's just more dialogue, if you will. I mean, they're pulling you over for a specific reason. I would just focus on that and let law enforcement enforce the laws. If they should choose to ask you if you have a firearm, I think that you're just kind of maybe adding to the issue if you're creating more dialogue. Let's just stick to the subject matter of you've been pulled over for a specific reason.
Good. May we have the next question, please? As a driver in a routine traffic stop, this follows what you're saying, what is the best for you to do when the officer asks you if you have a weapon?
Be honest. I have a weapon. And so we have to understand, because words have meaning, what is the weapon? Not all firearms are weapons. I may have hunting rifles in the back. I may have a range bag in the back with my competition guns. So more likely what they may be asking, and we don't want to assume it, that it's always just a firearm on your body. Do you have a knife on your body? Do you have a taser? What are some weapons that you may actually have? So if we're being specific to just firearms alone, if you have a concealed carry firearm, you may just say yes. And, or, make mouth words, use articulation, say it's on my body, it's on my waistline, it's wherever you're carrying it, it's in my bag that I usually will carry on body.
What happens if the officer says, "I'd like to see the weapon, please"?
So it's more in line with displaying it. If it's on your body, you just let them know I'm going to pull my shirt up and show you where my weapon is. It's in that bag down there. Would you like me to show you the bag? You can show that it's inside of a bag. If I have my purse, if it's in a purse. If it's open carry, then you just point to it. Hands are going to stay high. You're going to just point to where that firearm is. Like me personally, right now, I'm still carrying a firearm. Would I just raise up my shirt and go, "It's right there. It's right here, officer. That's where it is," and then just cover it back up?
If the officer asks you to give it the weapon, and the weapon you believe has a round in the chamber and a magazine with cartridges, is there a procedure or something you should do and the way that you hand the physical firearm to the officer?
So a police officer has to have good cause, probable cause to seize your firearm. If there wasn't any law that you broke that would go beyond the need to surrender your firearm, so that probable cause is, were you driving recklessly? So that actually shows that they could be detaining you. So the question would be, am I being detained? If so, if they're asking you to get out of the vehicle based on what it is that they're charging you with, that probable cause has to be there. Asking for a higher up to come, if they're asking you to get out of your vehicle. If I'm in my vehicle and they have probable cause to take possession of my firearm, that actually has to be present. If they have, their boss that shows up and says, "Yes, we have probable cause. We show that maybe this car has been reported as stolen," or maybe you have a warrant that you didn't know. A parking ticket could cause a warrant. So many different things that you well know, Don, that just
Yes.
may arise that could cause them to detain you. Now you're being arrested. And so a proper way to surrender that firearm, whenever possible, is keep it in the holster or keep it in the bag. Give them the whole bag. Manipulating handguns whenever possible, is going to be great. So if I had to take my gun off, and I'll show you, is that if I could, and it's not attached to my belt, if I have the clip method, it's just going to come out, and you can give that to the police officer. Here you go, officer. And you're going to give it to them while it's still maintained in that holster. Now, if this holster is on my belt, then my belt is going to come off so that I can take the holster off. If it's in a bag, I just give them the bag. Whenever possible, we want to maintain that the trigger guard and the trigger are covered at all times, because accidental discharge could happen. You got octopus hands going on around the gun, and when you're giving a gun to a police officer, handing it to them, now that gun's pointed at you, just saying. And so accidental discharge could actually potentially happen. And so we want to mitigate that we don't have that access to that trigger whenever possible.
So you don't want to hand the police, is it that you do not want to hand the police officer a loaded firearm? Or do you drop a magazine, rack the slide?
The less manipulation of the handgun, the better. There is no duty to clear the firearm. There's no duty to do that. So administrative gun handling, as little as possible whenever that's a thing, is going to keep things safer, keep you safer, keep them safer. The cameras are rolling, their body cams are rolling, so all the manipulation of the handgun, perception of, are you drawing your gun now? Should they draw their gun now? It's going to be a safer situation if it's in a holster, in a bag, taking the belt off, having them watch you, take that belt off. Don't make erratic movements, stay calm and compliant.
What happens if you have a shoulder holster?
Shoulder holster, it's going to come off.
Okay, so
Seatbelt comes off. If it's, under a jacket, officer, I need to take off my jacket. What if it's, what if it's on your ankle holster? And I mean, now we're getting into a dark space. Officer, could you light it up so you could see that I am taking the holster off my ankle? If you have some other different modes of carry, what if it's in the small of your back? Now it's, please try to turn as much as you can. Push that seat back and turn as much as you can to get that holster off. And so, yeah, the trigger and the trigger guard must be covered whenever possible. I think that's just a safer way to give the firearm in its entirety, in the condition that it's in, just safer for everybody.
Would you say that what you've just gone through, these various scenarios, is part of something which is taught at Homeland Personal Protection?
Yes, sir. We do teach that in our classes.
As something that should probably be taught at many concealed weapon classes or advanced classes?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely so. One of the most important things that I see is that I feel more police officers should jump into some of these classes. I know for us personally, we're offering free concealed carry weapons classes to all active police officers for them to come in and see exactly what are firearms instructors actually teaching the public so that they can better understand, what people are learning. And so even in coming and taking those classes, maybe they could even be an asset to all the firearms instructors out there who may not fully understand what is our law enforcement being taught. And even some police officers, I've been to seminars where police officers actually tell the public to do something, and I'm like, yeah, by the way, that's not legal. Here, let me pull up the law. So I think educating our law enforcement could be a benefit as educators in the public.
Well, thank you. Maybe go to the next question. Here we go. What happens after you show the officer your weapon and he asks you to get out of the car so he can search your vehicle?
So we're really going to need a supervisor. We're going to need a supervisor to show up so that we can have more eyes on what's going on, because that way you at least have some backup. If they're saying they're detaining you, that they do need to search your vehicle, they've got probable cause, you get out of your vehicle, they want to have you surrender your firearm to them. Again, getting that backup to you as well, not just their backup, but your backup, to have them come out and be a part of that whole process. If you haven't done anything wrong, you shouldn't be afraid to say, okay, go ahead, search my vehicle. You need to take my firearm? Again, keep it in that holster. Keep them safe, keep you safe, because you never know the gun handling skills of that police officer.
Next question. Okay. Question number 4. Even after you show the officer your weapon and he continues to ask questions about drug or contraband, how should you respond to the officer?
So we've already told them we have our weapons on us. If they're asking, here it is, I don't have any drugs, just being honest. So we know that in Nevada, we've got the whole recreational marijuana thing going on. I can tell you that from experience, I've actually had a student who said she was arrested because she'd actually taken Benadryl. And when she took a breathalyzer test, by the way, she actually came out more than the 0.08, which is that legal alcohol limit. And so she was arrested for DUI and also in possession of firearms in her vehicle. Because
DUI, being under the influence of alcohol or drugs and having a firearm is a separate crime.
It is. I mean, she was legally drunk with the Benadryl. Allergy season or not, you got to be really careful what medications you're ingesting. It can really affect your ability to think clearly, and especially when you're going to have firearms with you. So she broke 2 laws, so DUI plus that possession of that firearm over the alcohol legal limit.
Thank you. May we have the next question? Here is the big question from the past 2 gun shows. Can you be arrested for refusing to show your weapon if it is concealed?
So the question that's posed for me is that if it's a uniformed law enforcement that is asking you to display or to expose your firearm if it's concealed, if they are asking you, they also have to have probable cause. it's not just I'm randomly walking around and because I've got, I don't know, 511 gear on or tactical gear on or whatever, that they see that maybe I look like I have a gun on me and maybe it's just a cell phone, or, now they're asking me because they're only personally curious. It's not because I've broken any laws. That in itself can be questionable. I've talked to police officers before, and they said, well, we have to have probable cause before we ask somebody, are you concealed carrying a firearm? Do you have any weapons on you? And so that comes straight from police officers that I've actually spoken to.
Now, the answers to the questions which we've been directing to your attention to today, you're giving us responses. These responses are not to be taken as legal advice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
These responses are your training, your experience in showing what your students should know, what people who call you, they say, what happens in these particular situations. So you're not acting as a lawyer today. You're acting as an expert, as a trainer in this particular field, which does require a great deal of study and on the job and hands-on training. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Many years of training.
Thank you. Let's go to the videos, please, and we'll play those one right after the other, and we'll have a couple of questions afterwards.
Hands! Put the phone down now! Sit! Police body cam video shows the anxious moments after a police pursuit in Ann Arbor on April 16th. During the commotion, a Pittsfield Township police officer points his firearm and demands 10-year-old Benjamin Whitfield step out of his dad's car.
You're good. You're good.
As the officer tries to calm the kid down, the 10-year-old's hand is shaking. Then, the kid is made to stand up as he's handcuffed.
Are you okay?
Yes, I'm okay.
Moments later, the young boy watches as his dad is detained by other officers.
What happened on April 16th, 2021 was a travesty. What happened on April 16th, 2021 makes me sick.
On Tuesday, in Pittsfield Township, a crowd gathered to rally for Benjamin Whitfield and his family. Whitfield's mother says her son hasn't been the same since.
Benjamin was always my good kid. He always was, just wanted to play basketball. But he really don't want to do too much. All you do is sit in the house and play games now.
A family attorney says this incident began when Whitfield and his dad went to Briarwood Mall. Ann Arbor police shut down a road due to a shooting investigation. The attorney says Whitfield's dad drove the opposite direction of where police told drivers to go, which led to the pursuit and confrontation involving Whitfield.
Every time that he see the police, he gets scared.
A report from the Sentencing Project shows disparities in arrests involving black children. Black youth make up 15% of the American population, but more than 40% of children in juvenile custody. In Michigan, black children are 5 times more likely to be taken into custody than white children.
Another word for trauma is wound. And so these children become wounded.
Clinical therapist Dr. Sabrina Jackson says what happened to young Benjamin Whitfield can follow him into his adulthood if he doesn't get help.
You have to begin to give opportunities to see positive interaction with police, because there are some.
Benjamin Whitfield's family did file a federal lawsuit. Meanwhile, we reached out to the Pittsfield Township Police Department to ask about the officer's actions, if he acted accordingly, and if he's still on the job. They did not get back to us by our deadline. Brandon Hudson, Fox 2 News.
They're saying that you took something out of your truck, threw it in the back of another truck, and then that truck left.
I never did that. No.
Never did that?
I swear to God, in my life.
Okay. You willing to do a field sobriety test for me? Huh? You're not? Okay. Turn around, put your hands behind your back.
What?
Huh?
The stamp light?
I'm sorry, what?
What light did you say turn on?
I didn't say turn off any light. I said, are you willing to do a field sobriety test?
I said no.
And I said, turn around, put your hands behind your back then.
Why?
Because you're under arrest for DUI.
For what?
For what?
Yeah.
Because I think you're impaired.
I'm not impaired though. I'm just driving home from work.
Okay, then why won't you do a field sobriety test?
I'm not doing that.
Huh?
Because I don't need to.
You don't need to.
I don't need to.
You're leaning on your truck. You don't need to.
I mean, you're leaning.
You're absolutely. You don't need to. You're absolutely right. You
You're
do
leaning.
not.
You're leaning on.
You
my
do not
truck.
need to.
Okay.
So turn around. Put your hands behind your back.
No.
Okay. Ken.
first example, Ms. Mordaunt, we have a very graphic situation where a juvenile is being detained at gunpoint. The exercise that's well documented by Fox 2, wherever that was. But what we're looking for here is that what happens as a parent if you're watching this, you're coming out of Walmart, you're coming out of the grocery store, and there's a policeman pointing a gun at your child in the parking lot in broad daylight, and you know that the child just came out to go to the car and whatever. You know that he probably has not committed a crime, but what do you do if you see the police officer with the weapon pointed towards your son? What do you do?
So the video that I just watched was a great display of the law enforcement officer doing his job. He's basically enforcing the laws. In that video, it showed that there had been a shooter at a mall, and then you had the vehicle that the police officer had actually pulled over that had the young man in it and his father. The father actually went in the opposite direction from which the law enforcement actually told him to go. So again, we're looking at compliance, and so that kind of put a red flag up. Law enforcement pulled him over. They took out the 10-year-old. Law enforcement had their guns drawn just for their own protection, because they don't know that this person who has not followed the directions of the law enforcement, now they're having to enforce and just basically see, who is this person? Was this the person who actually did the shooting at the mall? So I think that the facts of the matter are being turned into something different. And so the child was not injured. The police officer was very kind to him, released him. And at the end of the day, I'm sure it's very emotional, it's very traumatic. But at the end of the day, I don't really feel that that police officer did anything wrong.
As a parent, when you see this situation, can you take action to defend your child, assuming you have a firearm, legal firearm concealed weapon permit?
I would say no.
Why?
Because the police officer is acting accordingly. He is doing his job. The child clearly in this photo was not being abused. He wasn't thrown to the ground. The police officer is being very gentle. I'm sure that a parent may, in their mind, want to defend their child. In this case, in looking at the video, it was clear that the police officer wasn't doing anything physical to the child and had great finger discipline. The firearm was in the low ready position, and even the child wasn't acting aggressive or anything. He was following rules. As a matter of fact, it was clear that the child was shaken. Can we put an age on this child? Sure, he was 10 years old, but nowadays you don't really know how old kids are. He's a big kid. And so, yeah, I mean, if we start putting a stigma on it, that he's 10 years old, we start talking about what race are they, things like that. This could have happened to anybody. And so had they not been compliant with law enforcement, it could have been anybody in this case. But like you said, you're asking me the question, as a parent, can you actually defend your child against a police officer? And if they're acting accordingly in this video, I don't actually see where you're defending your child when there isn't anything that's aggravating or truly offensive that the police officer was doing in that video.
Can you draw your weapon at the police, put in the police officer, say, stop, my son's not doing anything?
So you're asking me, can you? No.
Should you?
No.
And why not?
Because you could probably get shot.
For the reasons stated a minute ago.
Yes.
So, so this all depends on, there's an active shooting, what information the police officers had.
Correct.
So again, not a criticism of the young boy, not a criticism of the police officer, but very relevant questions which were presented to me by two separate people at the gun show last weekend, and in the recent past in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, as to the second one, we have a stop, DUI stop, and we have the officer asking questions. He believes that the suspect, the driver, is under the influence. From the perspective of the firearms trainer, we see a situation where the suspect ran away. Good or bad move on part of the suspect?
Very bad move on part of the suspect. It was clear that this individual had something to hide. He didn't want to comply with police officers. He was, combative. He didn't do what they asked him to do. And he already had a whole plan in his head. I mean, they didn't know that there was a firearm over in that bush. And so I really feel that the police officers acted accordingly. And whether or not he wanted death by, suicide by police officer, I don't know. I don't know what other priors this person had. I really feel that if I had to critique, I'd say that police officers probably should have been a little bit quicker to detain this individual and not allow him to create that distance that he was able to get, just saying.
From the perspective of the concealed weapon holder, you're at the stop. The police officers are asking you questions about the field sobriety test. And he articulates that he saw you throw something out. Question. This suspect denied throwing anything out, but ran directly to that bush. Yes. And then pulled out a firearm and displayed it in a way, threatening manner, that the police took immediate action. So, from the perspective of a trainer in firearms, what would you advise your students watching this video? What would you advise them, other than not being drunk, but what would you advise them to do?
I would advise them to be compliant. If the police officer wants to do a sobriety test, why not do the sobriety test? If you have nothing to hide, do the sobriety test. If you feel that maybe you couldn't pass the sobriety test and you're not drunk and you still can't pass the sobriety test, that's actually been documented that people just don't have good balance, or maybe they didn't have good motor skills and they just didn't do it. Getting a blood test or breathalyzer test, if it's an option, may be a way to go. But again, at the end of the day, you have a lot of police officers out there. They're risking their lives out there. Let's just try to make their jobs easier and just be compliant. Do as they're asking. Asking for another field officer to come out, and so their boss to come out and help with that. Again, having backup isn't just for police officers. You get backup as well.
Assuming that your student in a concealed weapon class environment, assuming that he has had a few drinks, he's driving down the road, do you advise throwing the weapon out the window? Yes or no?
No.
Why not?
No. I mean, you're already breaking the law as it is, and throwing a gun out of the window, you're putting a gun out there that is not kept away from unauthorized users, and you're also being disruptive. It's not a good idea. No, don't do that. That's silly.
One of the things that I noticed in this video when I first saw it is that the officers stopped him from what was a suspected drunk driver or impaired driver. Now, when you throw a weapon or anything out the window, the probability of your finding it immediately is remote. So let's break this video down and assume that the suspect had already stopped and the police caught up to him, which I think might be a scenario because the suspect immediately ran to that bush in the desert, and that was in Las Vegas, Nevada. And not a lot of fanfare on this, but because it was a good shooting.
Yes.
And we're not here advocating killing people, but this was obviously good work by the police officers when he did that. But the question is that in your training, would you advise someone to keep the weapon in the vehicle, possibly in a safe location, because you have been drinking?
So, playing devil's advocate, okay, you've been drinking, you're in your vehicle, you have firearms on you. It is a good idea to keep the firearm in a place where, even if you got into a car accident, that it's at least in a good containment system. If it's not on your person, that it is in a locked container. I do recommend having some sort of locking system inside the vehicle that is wire tied to the vehicle. So if your vehicle's okay, you've been drinking, your vehicle's being impounded, and now you have a firearm in there and it's loose. If it's on your person, of course, police officers are going to take it.
Last comment on that issue. I contacted my assembly person and sent an email stating that there should be a Nevada law in all bars at the exit saying, if you have a firearm and you've been drinking, you need to call rideshare. I can't tell you, I nearly got death threats from people because my cellular is a matter of public record. I nearly got death threats from people when I suggested that, and it was only a suggestion. So what do you think about that suggestion?
I think it's the responsible thing to do. If you have been drinking and you are going to go home, it's okay to. We have all kinds of rideshare in town. It's the responsible thing to do. Then you could just take rideshare to go and pick up your car afterwards.
What about the regulation, which I suggested, of a sign over the exit sign when you're leaving the bar?
So yeah, definitely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just giving good advice that if you do have drinks, that, hey, at least the bar's looking out for you.
Okay, very good. I want to thank the viewing and listening audience for looking at this program. We have our contact information for myself, Don Green. You can reach me on my cellular at 702-409-8239. And Ms. Mordaunt, your number for Homeland Personal Protection?
HPPtraining.com or 702-375-5900. You can call that number. It's also a cell phone number. You can text as well. So, yeah, I look forward to hearing from you.
And we want to thank Rigel Studios for their assistance in the production of this program. Thank you so much and good day.